Practicing the four sublime emotions this week. Metta, tender, gentle affection for ourselves, others, and everything, all the support systems for life. So beings or places, we can feel this affection for. And as I said the first night, according to the Buddha and according to the scientific laws, gravitational force means we have an effect on everything in the universe, and on everyone, and everything and everyone, an effect on us, a gravitational pull.
It doesn't seem like there's a speaker on.
Is something not on?
Sorry. I could tell people, a lot of people couldn't hear.
Ah, is it on? Is it on?
So
No?
I didn't turn that back speaker on because it wasn't Michelle and you project better. Do you want that back speaker on? Okay. Sorry, everyone.
No worries.
These retreats are quite different than 30 years ago.
No one can hear.
Yeah. Can't hear, can't walk so well, and can't sit so well, can't see so well. Thus, the tender and gentle, affectionate feelings for ourselves and all beings and all things, and recognizing that it's not a controlling or excessive, possessive, self-centered kind of love, and that's because, as Michelle was saying last night, it's love infused with this profound wisdom, not a psychological or intellectual wisdom, coming from a much deeper intuitive place. And then the karuna we practice, the primary emotion there, care. So trying to locate that in our emotional field and the sensations in the body, to recognize what that feels like, because it's always a pleasant feeling tone. And so when it isn't, it's a signal that something else is happening. That caring means we're able to open to pain and stress and anxiety in all the forms of dukkha in suffering beings, ourselves, other people, the world, and so forth, and abide in this care. And then because there's wisdom there, we at the time we know what to do. Just be there, doing nothing except emitting this care, or how we use our language, our voice, chosen words, or how we use our body, how we energetically or actually hold the person in pain. And then the mudita, appreciative joy, where we find the way to sidestep what we learn in culture, to analyze, compare, compete, and thus grow, a resentment or envy or jealousy for what's out there, what we're told we need to have, the one of everything to be happy. And instead just know what's enough, or just enough, like the begging bowl example in Japan that Michelle used last night. So appreciative consciousness is rare. And to restore its natural place in our heart and in our systems also restores our connection to our worthiness or value, which then heals all the wounds of shame, intrusion, and not being told we're not good or not good enough. All those messages that are lodged deeply. And when they're there, when they're strong, the combination of the Brahma Vihara or other Brahma Viharas to care for that pain with compassion, or the mindfulness that carefully dismantles enough to see that those painful wounds are not us. They're just painful wounds. And they're just like floating in space, and happens to be our own system at the moment. But the wisdom we learn, as Michelle articulated so clearly last night, is that all of them, along with everything, are impermanent. And all are impersonal. So we're able to step back just for moments at a time and not take the particular wounding of shame or manipulation, violent intrusion, whatever, personally, and then make ourselves bad and believe that story. A very slow, careful capacity of these emotions to open all that up, to feel it, and feeling is healing, and repair it, like the Japanese pottery, kintsukuroi, rejoin it in a way that the seams shine with the goodness, with that glitter of our gold, our shimmer with silver. And then finally, what I'll be talking about tonight, upekkha, this fine balance, even-minded emotion. We discover that it is an emotion, even though it doesn't have the intensity we're used to, pleasure or pain, gain or loss, that play of opposites. The other thing our culture teaches us is to be like intensity junkies. I forget if it was here, I'm sorry if it was here, but I think it might have been at UBC. I spoke about this research, this test they did at Harvard, where people would rather shock themselves than have nothing happening. Being in a room where they were just by themselves, alone, and there was no stimulation. So rather than being with that neutral feeling tone, that upekkha feeling tone, they'd rather put their fingers in this thing that gave them a jolt. It's true. So it's an emotion that we don't regard very much. Even-mindedness, equipoise, of mental, bodily balance. But it's just as sublime as unconditional loving kindness, and just as caring and resonant with people's suffering and hurt, dukkha, as a compassion practice, and just as celebratory as the mudita, which attunes wherever there's happiness or wherever we just see that and delight in what people are themselves doing and well and being happy at, whether it's parenting or their art or their work or their relations. Simple, from gardening to the most sophisticated kinds of scientific involvements, doesn't matter. We just see where people feel that comfort and love what they're doing, even if it's just for a while, and that we can add that appreciative joy to that. Well, this upekkha has just as much meaning as an emotion in its balance. Its temperament of not moving toward or away from anything. So its opposite is the reactivity. It goes for excessive attachment, insatiable. So it's not like all the little desires that we all have every day. It's intense wanting that's never fulfilled, so it becomes addictive and we just keep chasing something that is never fulfilling. Or the opposite, a kind of intense, aggressive aversion. Not our little irritations and angers that come with normal living that can be seen, felt, repaired, or transformed, but really reactive as a habit pattern of the mind. That's how we want to hold the opposite of this emotion of equanimity or mental equipoise, balance. Like bamboo, I was using in an example in a group, I think today, like the bamboo of Hawaii, when there's these storms, powerful rain, wind storms, and the forests of bamboo, they bend this way and they bend that way and backwards and forwards and all over the place. Sometimes bend so far it looks like they're going to break. They don't break because their strength is in their vulnerability, their capacity to bend instead of break, because they're hollow, and the outer core is firm and strong. Just these strings, textures of bamboo material. So they always come back to center. The wind stops, and they come right back to center. That's where they're at home. So in the same way, we're buffeted by the winds of circumstance and change. And we never know what's going to happen and when it's going to happen and how long it's going to be. So we might feel quite battered at times, like the ancient Polynesian navigators in the storms and the current ones of the last 40 years who have experienced everything, including the boat flipping over in the early years. And being subject to that uncertainty and these conditions of circumstance is utterly indicative of how and why we need that emotion of centering and the power of centering, of being in the midst of things as they are, the very things that we can't control, just like we can't control the weather, the storms. We're going to be beset with that. So the primary kinds of storms that we meet are what the Buddha called Lokadhamma, which we've mentioned briefly a couple of times. Loka means world. The psychological world of experience, not like the world out there. Still, he always talks about what we can actually experience, what's true, what's real. And what's true, what's real is what we see, the light that hits the eye sensitivity, sound vibrations, ear sensitivity, and other senses. What comes into the body, the bodily feelings and mental states that have characteristics, nature and texture. It's felt experience. So that's what's true and that's what's real. No one can tell us that something doesn't have a smooth surface or a rough, grainy surface in the body, or when our hands sweep over sand or silk. So Loka world is our psychological world of immediate experience. And Dhamma here is in the meaning of nature. So worldly nature, we could say the way of the world. And the way of the world that we meet and need to navigate through are the 8 worldly conditions of pleasure and pain, which we all meet and have no control over when one will come or the other, no matter how much we try to chase one and push the other away. And praise and blame, which, as I mentioned before, whether we deserve it or not, we get praise at times. And whether we deserve it or not, we are blamed at times. And we can always just pause, use wise reflection, and feel whether that we can take that praise in. Because so much a part of our defense is that we're not good enough, and so we don't allow the praise in, even when we do deserve it. So there's an opportunity right there to see if we can set aside our resistance to letting it in, or just seeing if it's true or not, for being praised for something that, isn't accurate at that time. Likewise with the blame, which is harder to feel blame, and often goes right to our shame, hurt locker. But if we can pause and consider, is what I'm being blamed for accurate? Did I do something unskillful that requires asking for forgiveness, which we've forgotten to teach you all? So the quick teaching for those of you who have to leave tomorrow is tomorrow morning is anyone anywhere who I have knowingly or unknowingly harmed and caused suffering to, I ask your forgiveness. I'll say that on behalf of the 3 of us, Pari, Michelle, myself, and anyone who has knowingly or unknowingly, intentionally or unintentionally caused us any harm, pain, suffering, we freely forgive you. And when you do this practice, you can just a little caveat there, I forgive you as much as I'm able at this time. Make it work for you. And lastly, often most importantly, any way in which we have harmed ourselves, knowingly, unknowingly, forgive myself. So there, we're getting blamed, and then we just pause, check out, maybe that wasn't so skillful, or maybe it was hurtful to myself or others. And feel the remorse, skillful remorse. Because guilt is not useful. It's born of ill will, anger, unhealthy psychological patterns. Whereas wise remorse we correct error, just recalibrate, and then navigate away from those actions or habits or blind areas where we hurt ourselves or others. So praise, blame, honor, dishonor. Just honor when we're like, in this sense, it's like also called fame and disrepute, when we have lots of friends, and disrepute or dishonor when we feel alone, when we feel friendless and abandoned. And then gain and loss, all the ways in which we feel accomplished and have moved forward, just in little ways every day, and all the ways in which we feel like things that we've done are slipping away, and we're losing. So we all experience that, and it's all out of our control. We're buffeted by those kinds of winds of circumstance. Pleasure, pain, praise, blame, honor, dishonor, or fame and disrepute. And finally, gain and loss. To use wise consideration, and then when we're actually practicing, we will come up against them all the time. We'll feel them all the time. We'll have these either experientially, just pain in the body, or those voices that are blaming and punishing to ourselves, and the sense of our practice progressing and then regressing and so forth. It's good not to believe in the stories that come up about them. Rather, the very immediacy of the experience, and separate the story from the actual sensation, emotional sensation, physical sensation, feeling tone of pleasant or unpleasant. The stories rarely help. At times, as I said, using wise reflection, where we consider, okay, what's going on here? Am I approaching this in a skillful way? Or am I lost in thought? Am I caught by this pattern that's I'm self-flagellating for not being good or not being good enough? And in that way, then we help untangle very old patterns, habit patterns. The Buddha said of the emotion of equanimity or upekkha, it's the heart that's abundant, exalted, immeasurable, and without aggression, boundless in all directions, above, below, all around. It is a refuge and acts for both ourselves and others as like a beacon, as I've mentioned before, where we become a refuge to ourselves, or if we can call up this equanimity or just slide into it in a certain situation where there's anxiety and chaos, it can change the whole room. If there's one person who has this degree of non-reactivity, and it also means non-attachment. Equanimity is non-attachment and non-identification. Those are all the reactive opposites. That energy field is so soothing. People don't even know why they're suddenly chilling out from that chaos and reactivity and disturbance. So it's so immediately calming for oneself, one-on-one, in a small group, in a large room. It has that effect. And pay attention when those of you leaving, when you go out of here, and just how you're traveling and who you begin to interrelate with as soon as you start driving or riding in the ferry and going from place to place. Keep in mind these practices because they are an immediate bridge to the world out there. How we relate with or without that sense of connection, caring, appreciative, like just thank you, just looking people in the eye when they hand you a ticket, or not a speeding ticket necessarily, but a ferry ticket, that engagement, it's validating people. It's validating for people, and people often just feel this like they're a machine, just there to, and they're tired, and other people have been grumpy. But just by pausing and making a connection can change a person's, their whole day, their whole outlook, and renew their faith in humanness and kindness and so forth. Just see if that's not true for you. We've talked about how the near enemy it's often been for us a defense, most often unconscious when we're younger, before we come into a practice, starting from when we're actually in a pre-verbal state, like just all the impressions that sometimes are overwhelming, and we're helpless to do anything, physically, mentally, emotionally. But already, whether it's our crying, our way of closing our little fists, and putting them by our chest or our face and so forth, we're already going into these defensive modes when we're that young. And then later on, when we do reach by age 2 and on, and we are more conceptual, we find how to do that, more and more, and continue using those forces to whatever, suppress emotion, to not feel. That's it's safer often than feeling overwhelming emotion. We don't know how to meet overwhelming emotion with our own emotion. We feel bulldozed. We feel like a tsunami has just washed over us, and so it's better to suppress the emotion, or we close up. I said today in an interview, it's like, in Iron Man, when he starts to step into his Iron Man suit, and it immediately clamps all over him, shuts across his chest and his face, and there it is, and he's totally ironed in there, right? And so, like, one yogi today was talking about how powerful the metta is, and just touching everywhere throughout her system, bodily, emotions, and so forth, and one with the waves and the shoreline, and and then walking into a room, feeling just the overwhelm, the exposure, like a nakedness in the room, and then constriction happens just immediately. It's that long old habit, but then touching that with the metta and then letting it go, because it's safe enough to do that now. So to see again and again how these old defensive systems work and be patient with them, because they'll likely continue to work, and it's okay. It's okay. We'll just be more conscious of them and often learn to replace them with, like, fierce compassion, or or equanimity itself, which is like being indifferent or dissociating, but it's not going indifferent or dissociating or shutting down. It's just being non-reactive, like that bamboo. Its very strength is in its vulnerability. It can bend here and there, but not break. So it's no problem. It's like Michelle saying last night, oh, I thought I got rid of that. That's a punishing way. That's a blaming thing we do, like the 8 worldly conditions, the Lokadhammas. I should have been rid of that. No, not at all. We've been practicing so long to protect ourselves that Iron Man suit is going to just go into effect. And maybe we don't have access immediately. It takes a long time to get these Brahmaviharas working. After the first long retreat we did with U Pandita, where it was quite profound and quite deep, still I had to add it to my practice every day for 8 or 9 months, closer to a year perhaps, before I felt I could, like out surfing late at night when the sun's gone down and there's creatures in the water, like we call the man in the gray suit, tiger sharks, but I'd still be enjoying and having a really great time with these waves. But I'd feel I'm looking around and I'd hear this sound and see a fin, but it was just a turtle. But by this time, after these long retreats and months of practicing just a little bit every day, I could call up the metta and it would displace the fear. So that kind of patience with the defenses just automatically working, and then being all right with that, slowly then seeing if the power of love that protects, makes us feel safe, can gradually replace some of those defenses, and the fearlessness or fierceness of compassion can gradually replace some of our survival strategies, safety measures, and how disarming appreciative joy is. It's like when you're around dogs, for example. I'm usually not afraid of dogs, and it's because I know, and horses, because I know they know if you're afraid, and it makes them skittish, and it makes them angry and suspicious and bound, at least ready to bark or more. But if we put out this I'm safe energy, the mudita, I'm a safe person, and like with a horse, you just even talk to them saying, I'm not afraid of you. I understand that you've been hurt and that you're afraid and you don't know who's friendly and unfriendly. That's what horse whisperers are able to do. They communicate safety and understanding, and gradually the horse relaxes. The same experience I have with horses and most dogs. One occasion when I was young, this German Shepherd attacked me on my bike. So I just got off my bike and took my bike and just banged him on the head, And he went running off. And from then on, I felt like, well, I can defend myself if I have to. So, but I'm not recommending that at all. And it probably wasn't fierce compassion. It's probably anger and fear. Two really good defensive mechanisms if we can't find fierce compassion. A lot of navigating this lokadhamma, these opposites, are learning to sidestep projection, our own and others. Because in this play of opposites, which becomes like, a fiction, pleasure, pain, praise, blame, fame and disrepute, gain and loss, and being bounced between the two. Well, the upekkha, being in the midst of things as they are, doesn't mean being in the middle of praise and blame, or gain and loss, or pleasure and pain. It means going beyond them. Beyond that play of opposites altogether. And then it's like we have more agility to recognize if we're projecting blame on ourselves or others, or anger on ourselves or others, and our effort, intense or excessive effort to try and control things to make them pleasant, or control things to prevent the pain, and so forth. Learning to sidestep all of that, we can really go deep in that relaxation I talked about the first night, viveka, which, one of the meanings is seclusion from intrusion of the hindrances, desire, sense desire, anger, sleepiness, restlessness, doubt. But it's also the peace of solitude, of aloneness, and the resource of this profound rest that we have in us. It's like the goodness that lives in us, that's much bigger and deeper and stronger than shame and unworthiness, and eventually overcomes them as we shine the light of the Brahma Viharas, and often particularly the mudita. The joy helps restore that sense of worthiness and goodness. And it's to feel the largeness and bigness of that place of rest, place of relaxation that has nothing to do with being tired, or the toxic feelings we have from a long day's work, activities, where we are genuinely tired and do need the kind of rest of laying down and sleeping. This is a rest that comes from practicing. In fact, viveka is a synonym for awakening, or realization, the word nibbana. The very first thing we want to learn in meditation is that to reach that sensitivity, that is open awareness, we have to let go and find that place of rest. The body and the emotional body, the mental body, everything has to learn to just drop into itself. And it's like I said the other night, that abused elephants learning to be elephant again. And here, us, humans on retreats, learning to be human again. We know this place of rest because that lives there with our goodness. And it's so deeply restorative in a much more profound way than just this daily, nightly sleep we need to restore. And then we can recognize how, when we do project, how our stories dissociate from experience, disconnect us from what's real and true. They're judging and they're spinning off. So it divides us from immediate experience. I'm not talking about wise reflection. I'm talking about the habit of our dramas and narrative that go on and on. Whereas feeling awareness unites, connects, restores that sense of unity and connection with things. So that's why our emphasis of feeling into the body, feeling our emotions in the body, in the body and the senses. That's where the Brahma Viharas get big and bigger, and we see their and feel their immeasurable and boundless nature, and that's where the Vipassana awareness and awakening live and happen in the body and senses. And why we've made this protective space here and the environment here, everything's talking to us, the trees and the earth and the water and the eagles and the orcas way out there, and every being is right here in part of weaving this fabric of profound safety that lets us go to that place of rest. And we know we're not going to be intruded upon or violated, even if it's for a few nano moments. We just get a few nano moments, it gives us confidence. And a few more gives us a little more confidence, grows our confidence and trust, and then courage. And that sustains our mindfulness of the Brahma Viharas, our mindfulness of moment-to-moment experience. And that deepens the stillness and unity. And our sensing, feeling awareness starts to replace the habit of the discursive mind that wants to analyze and comment on everything that's happening all the time. This Thai monk passed away in 1983, and we were staying in the same monastery in Thailand while I was waiting for a visa back into Burma. An elder monk friend of his once asked him if he still had anger. In this system there are various stages, irreversible stages of awakening, that begin with seeing through the illusion of a personality belief system, and that plant our feet on the path. We're certain that there is a path that works, a path to this rest, to these unconditional, boundless metta state, a path to these awakening states. And they progress. And like one of the very higher awakening realization states is where all desire and the insatiable, unhealthy desire and anger or ill will fall away. So it may be that his friend was sort of testing him to find out if he's progressed that far. We consider that like the first real saintly place. The third awakening, the fourth one being complete awakening. All the unhealthy states vanish from the mind. All traces of anxiety and ignorance and subtlest desire, conceit, they don't fall away to that last stage. So Ajahn Dun Attilo just took in the question of his friend. Do you still have anger? Yes, he answered honestly. But I don't pick it up. Why I like that example is because it shows, like so many other things do, that the process and strength of our practice and the qualities that get stronger and stronger and unify with other skillful states create this capacity to live like awakened, or more awakened people. We can see anger at times and not pick it up. We can see that insatiable desire, the tendency for it, and not pick it up, and envy and jealousy and self-hatred and so forth. You can start to feel that mind bending toward it like the bamboo in a windstorm, and just come back to center. I was saying yesterday maybe that a lot of the personality traits in our character structure, have the expectation, again, as Michelle was saying last night, I thought I got rid of that. I thought that was gone. That tendency to be so judgmental or blah, blah, blah. So another story similar to this one that I just told, Achan Dun Attilo, from the ancient Buddhist texts. There was this monk from Sri Lanka, and he was very arrogant, conceited, and put himself above everyone. And he called everybody, Vasili, which means jackass. All the time, all throughout the day. Everyone was a jackass, And then it said he became enlightened. He became fully enlightened. However, he still called everyone Vasili, jackass. So some monks went to the Buddha and said, what's up? Is he really, how can he be enlightened and still call everyone jackass? And the Buddha said, well, for 500 lifetimes, he's been calling everyone a jackass. And so such a powerful tendency in his mind that he still calls everyone jackass. However, there's no ill will. There's no aversion. There's no more conceit. So it's just empty. That was so relieving to me, That some of our habit, I think I'll never get rid of this particular habit. It's never going to happen. And yeah, the tendencies may still be there. In fact, we may still, say or do things that we have done for a long time. But as we grow our awareness, it's just going to have less poison behind it, less greed, hatred, delusion behind it. Last thing I want to say, and then end with a poem, is that everything we've been doing this week, and what some of you will be leaving with tomorrow, is their treasures, the precious gifts. As I read from the Anna Swear poem the other night, and those of us who stay, we'll see how these Brahma Viharas feed and support the path of realization, of awakening, the progress of further opening and deepening, as Michelle was talking about in the classical sense last night, what's called the Eightfold Path. The Buddha taught that all conditioned phenomena are impermanent, and we live this lokadhamma. It's all conditioned phenomena. He said, the Eightfold Path is the best of conditioned phenomena, because it's the conditions that end suffering. It's the karma that ends karma. One moment of intentional mindfulness does not leave a karmic trace. Karma just means action. And karma and intention are the same in Buddhist psychology. Karma means action. Cetana in Buddhist psychology means volition or intention. So every time we are mindful, it's non-doing. It's doing nothing. We're not creating any kind of karmic cycle. We've done a lot of really skillful, beautiful, healthy things. And that's created the conditions for us to be here, to be in a human body, to have a mind that can learn, to have been moved, to listen to Dhamma, to come to a retreat, and so forth. All that is the results of past really generous and skillful actions. And we can continue that, Skillful actions can lead to more skillful results, just as dark actions can lead to more darkness. But chains are chains, whether gold or iron. And the Buddha was talking about a way of, breaking the cycle altogether, breaking the chains of bondage. So we can still be caught, we can still identify with our healthy actions, our skillful actions that end in skillful results. We can identify with being good, with being generous, with being loving. So the wisdom is what makes love selfless, and compassion and all other things selfless. So every moment that we're being mindful, we're not creating any new action, karmic trace, whether gold or iron, whether light or dark. And this whole Eightfold Path goes toward the increased moments of this, everything coming down to a moment of pure awareness where there's just not a trace. It doesn't leave a trace. It's like writing our name in water of a future action. In the meantime, of course, there's lots of thoughts and lots of things we say and lots of things we do that continue the karmic cycles, whether skillful or unskillful. But every moment of being mindful is, as I've said before, like a million moments of not being mindful. And that power builds up, and it builds up, and that's why suddenly we have a liberating insight, an intuitive awakening, like a light goes off in a dark cave. And we for just a nano moment, we see things as they are. As Michelle said, it may not last long, and in fact, usually does not last so long, although we often feel the resulting joy from that. Every insight has accompanying Dhamma joy, that is not a non-dependent inner Dhamma pleasure or delight or joy. And there may be some reflection. Oh, something just happened. I wonder what that was. So it may be a few minutes of reflection, and we notice the reflecting. That's not part of the insight, but it results from something having happened, and then we engage the intellect. But actual insight is free of intellect and free of discursive thought, conceptual thought. And this all leads toward the unconditioned. All phenomena are conditioned, except one, and that's freedom, that's nibbana, that's liberation. The same with the Brahmaviharas. Pure moments of metta are pre-verbal, and it's just metta. It's not causing any new karma, even though it has this immense effect on the universe. So the poem I'm ending with, it's about finding our center, the upekkha. And as you'll see, there's this Brahma Vihara Upekkha and there's a Vipassana Upekkha. They're very similar in the balance, and they're also unique in the Brahma Vihara Upekkha being, anchored and being a rudder to navigate through the way of the world, Lokadhamma, that play of opposites. And the Vipassana equanimity, as you'll see, is being in the midst of change, transitory nature, and just resting in that selfless understanding. So this is by William Stafford. He actually wrote this for another friend, poet friend, who was suffering. It's called Cutting Loose. Sometimes from sorrow, for no reason, you sing. For no reason, you accept the way of being lost, cutting loose from all else, and electing a world where you go where you want to. Arbitrarily, a sound comes, a reminder that a steady center is holding all else. If you listen, that sound will tell you where it is, and you can slide your way past trouble. Certain twisted monsters always block the path, but that's when you get going best. Glad to be lost, learning how real it is here on earth, again and again. Sit for a moment.